What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me are my two great co-hosts, Federico Perez and Ralph Hanna. And guys, we are coming off another international break, the final international break of 2025. Obviously, we got to talk about Paraguay's last two friendlies against the United States and Mexico. Some yin and yang, some differences in both the two games. But I think obviously the high note is that we ended off with the win. We beat Mexico 2-1 despite losing 2-1 to the United States. But yeah, all the attention now is getting into the World Cup draw because in about officially 14 days, we will get the World Cup draw happening in the United States. You know, we have 42 countries already qualified for the World Cup. We still have some final spots to be cited in Europe and in other continents, but the majority are there. The majority are all waiting on December 5th to see who the rivals will be in the group stage of the World Cup. Obviously, Paraguay is going to be like any of the countries that are in this are going to be on high alert to see what's going to happen. And yeah, I think also a lot of these players have also had some really good auditions. Some players who have kind of maybe won their spot into the main bubble. Some players who maybe are fighting for their spots. And yeah, and then obviously a lot of debates to go on. So we'll obviously talk about it here as we always do here on Guarani Vision on the Paraguay national team. It's obviously a big weekend as well with briefly mentioning it, the Copa Sudamericana final. We have it here in Asunción, the Defensor del Chaco tomorrow at the time of recording. We got Lanús taking on Atlético Mineiro. We get a Paraguayan champion. We're going to get a Paraguayan champion regardless of what happens tomorrow because obviously Lanús have Ronaldo Jesus on that side and Atlético Mineiro have Junior Alonso on that side. So we will get a Paraguayan champion winning in Paraguay tomorrow, and then obviously next week we obviously will probably maybe decide a Clausura champion. We also will decide a Libertadores champion when Palmeiras take on Flamengo with Ramon Sosa and Gustavo Gomez on the Palmeiras side to see if the captain of the national team can win yet another Copa Libertadores title. But let's talk about just the main important thing, the national team. But before I go into that, I want to go to Fede, who's obviously in Paraguay, who, just told us before recording that he's off to the Sudamericana final tomorrow. I got to ask, what's the vibe there going on in Paraguay? I mean, it feels like there's so many sporting events happening at the minute, and of course, we're right towards the end of the year, which is, obviously a crucial time for a lot of people. But to see a lot of fans from Lanús and Mineiro, and even Paraguayans, take joy of this Sudamericana final, another one, of course, in the country. It really shows the profile of how much Paraguay is gaining. Not just in South America, I think in the world's game, because it is a continental final, and then just the importance of being able to be good hosts.
Hi, Roberto. Hi, Ralph. Hi to everyone listening to Guarani Vision. It's great to be back for another episode, another week. And yeah, it is, right? I mean, the country that hosts these humongous sporting events lately, and we got another one right after what we had last year, with the Copa Sudamericana final with many Racing fans coming here to Paraguay now. I don't think we're gonna have that amount of people in the city in Asunción, but you do see pretty much the hotels, they're packed. There's no place. There's people are looking where they can stay. And it is going to be a fun weekend because we're going to have a champion and we're going to have celebrations on the streets. There's a lot of Brazilians in the country. There's a lot of Argentines also in the country. So it's definitely going to be an exciting weekend. The Clausura is also coming to crunch time with Cerro Porteño and Guarani in the fight. There could be a champion also here in Paraguay this weekend. So it could be that kind of a weekend where I don't know, we kick off the holiday season, I would even say, for some, or for at least for football fans. And as for the national team, guys, I mean, last friendlies, I'm feeling good about what I saw, especially in the second game, the reaction from the team in the second half. Not so happy from what I saw in the first game, but if there was one game I would have picked out of the two to beat, it was definitely Mexico because, I'm fond of the United States. I got a lot of friends over there. So if there was a country I kind of wanted to beat more, it was definitely Mexico because, I love my Mexicans, don't get me wrong, but beating Mexico feels kind of good right now because I kind of feel like they're, one step behind us as a team as of right now. And it was kind of that game where you felt like, okay, this team also has a couple of issues that they need to take care of. And we put the pressure on them, right? And it felt good afterwards to see the guys win the last game of the year and come back home or go back to their leagues feeling good about themselves and kind of cutting the streak. I mean, we got used to winning in the qualifiers, and I wasn't feeling too good about these last results in Asia and against the U.S. But we catched up against the Mexicans, and we got everything to talk about because we're definitely going to talk about these national team games and review both.
Yeah, totally. And Ralph, I think that is really important what he said. We were fortunate enough to be in the last game, before this one that they beat Mexico over there in Atlanta, and that was right before the World Cup. And here we are, 4 years, well, 3 years later. They do beat Mexico just a few months before the actual start of the World Cup, and obviously before the start of the draw. Maybe it's a good omen, I guess, to always play Mexico before a World Cup. But yeah, I think there's also just so much expectation in like regardless of the performance, and ultimately it was a friendly. I think we should always remember that it is that. It's not in comparison to what the other teams around the world are playing right now, like qualifiers or, trying to get into playoffs and all that kind of stuff. But for us and for many of the South Americans, they also are just preparing for just, players that are want to get ready. And I think we even saw, he was very firm and uh he was right in what he said that like you know the continental finals, and that's why we didn't see Gustavo and we didn't see Junior Alonso and many others play in the second game because of their obligations to continental finals. It shows that there is that level of management, load management, I guess, when it comes to certain games that you know you're basically secured a spot in the World Cup squad barring any sort of injury. But for some of these players, and we'll talk about them when we mention these games, these are players who really are looking at, kind of their final chances of being on the squad. Because obviously in March, there are a couple more friendlies, but you would think that it's going to be with the same base of players that have been used to during the qualifiers and obviously in the last friendlies. So really, this was kind of the time to really make a name for yourself to be on that World Cup squad.
Yeah, I think that's right. Hello to everybody watching and listening. And what we saw talking about the different players is obviously Paraguay never really played their what would be maybe their best 11 because people were missing out for different kind of issues, and we had surprise suspensions, injuries, or like you were saying, players having to go home. So we never saw, I would say, the best defense that Paraguay could put out there, and it was the fourth of all these four friendlies. They keep conceding goals, so that is one thing that I'm sure Alfaro will be looking at. But otherwise, I think it was very exciting to see the players that are coming in, those fringe players like you mentioned, are starting to make a bit of an impact and do something to try and solidify their place. So overall, I think it was an important two games as we go. Now we're just 2 weeks away from we're just talking offline, right? We're only two Fridays away from the World Cup draw, and who knows, they could end up facing one of those two teams again because they're both first seeds. But ultimately, I think a good time was had in America for the group, and now you kind of go without too much stress, like you were saying, into March. There's maybe one or two players that are still we're not sure if they will be in the squad, won't be in the squad. But I think for most of the group, it's kind of going in without much stress, knowing that March is now that time just to fine tune a few details. And I'm sure that they'll be looking from there on very specifically at the opponents they know they're going to face in the group stages.
Absolutely, because Paraguay are in pot three, and so obviously the last two games, well, last four games, they're taking on teams that are going to be in pot two with Japan and South Korea, and then two teams in pot one with the US and Mexico. And I think that was obviously deliberate from Gustavo Alfaro and the APF to get results, to get games like this that are obviously of higher caliber because, like you said, Ralph, those are potential games that they could face in the World Cup. In a couple of months as well. So let's talk about the first game that I had the fortune of going to in Philadelphia. There was a lot of Paraguayans in this one, I think 5,000 at the end in a stadium of 17,000. Paraguay against the United States. And, looking at the lineup that we had, I think the first big one was Orlando Gil getting the start. So clearly, and, we'll talk about the goalkeeper thing afterwards, but you had Orlando Gil starting at Blas Rivero, starting at left back. So because Omar Lerete had not cleared protocol and of course didn't play, we saw a back four of Cáceres, Gomez, Junior Alonso as the two center backs pairing with Gustavo and Blas Riveros in defense. In the midfield, we had Damian Bobadilla. We had really sort of a 4-4-2, I want to say. So you had Diego Gonzalez, Miguel Almiron, Diego Gomez, and Damian Bobadilla, and then the front two of Julio Enciso and Alex Arce. So not the strongest lineup you can get, but of course it is still a pretty decent squad to begin with. And it did not start off well, Ralph. It did not start off well. It was in the fourth minute, very early. We saw Gio Reyna scoring. It was actually a really nice assist from Max Asprin, who was also later had to be part of the a little bit of something else that happened during the game. But really nice cross. Gio Reyna got his goal on it. Actually hit the post of his, but not much you can really do in that first goal.
Well, not much the goalkeeper could do. That's very true. But I think it's a bit disappointing for Paraguay to let Gio Reyna score a header. I heard it's the first time he'd ever scored a header for club or country because I don't know how tall he is, but he's not particularly big. And so that was, I suppose, like you say, one of the worst possible starts. But it was an interesting. I think that almost set the tone a bit for the game that Paraguay were happy to let the US have the ball and try and be quite deep, defend quite deep. But the US are actually pretty good when they're in the final third and using the ball. And so we saw that pattern continue throughout much of the game. The good thing is, of course, Paraguay bounced straight back, right, with the goal of their own, and that was very much the pattern that I think Alfaro was trying to get from the team. If he was going to defend deep, he wanted to be very direct. He didn't have Cubas in the middle, and he had to play Gomez a bit deeper. So he was like, "Well, I'm just going to try and go direct and get balls down," and that's especially why I think he picked those two fullbacks you mentioned, because it was a bit of a surprise, I think, for us to see Riveros and Cáceres play that are both quite forward thinking and attacking fullbacks. And so the ball gets down the wing, and it's Almiron who's been just such a good player under Alfaro. I think with Alderete not playing, Almiron has become now the most used player by Alfaro during his time, and he gets the ball across for Alex Arce to score his first goal for Paraguay, which I think was a long time coming. And I think it was very good timing for him personally, talking about those fringe players in the team. We were really worrying about, apart from Sanabria, who could be your number nine, who could possibly fill in there. And I think that will have given him a lot of confidence. And then from there, I mean, maybe I'll throw over to Fede, but what I saw, which I was kind of surprised by, was a very physical US team that were really able to, I think, kind of bully Paraguay a bit, which I was not expecting to see. And the game does get a bit choppy, and Roberto, you kind of you kind of indicated what it all boils over at the end. But even throughout the game, I just thought the US were really very good in closing down in their press and not letting Paraguay really get out with what they wanted to do, which was try and play the ball past them quickly, because they were just too good, I thought, in the press.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys liked how the refs handle these two games with all those situations happening, right? Heading into the World Cup, that's something definitely to talk about, in the locker room with the guys, because, that can cost you, a red card. We saw it against Bolivia, guys, the whole bench getting out there and trying to fight, getting in the field. We saw with Uruguay also in the Copa America. They got sanctioned really badly. We got to be careful with these kind of things. It's good. You show your temper. You defend your players, your teammates, but you got to be careful with these things. And these things can come back and bite you in a World Cup, in a short tournament. And I don't like that from the guys. They got to keep their heads cool. The coaching staff, I think, also has to hold them back a bit. I mean, I think that's something to look at. I believe, just like Ralph said, nobody was expecting that from the U.S. team to be that feisty, to always, be in front of Gustavo Gomez, in front of anyone, and go back and forth, and not just hitting each other for the ball. It did not look like a friendly at all. And some of Paraguayan players kind of went into that friendly mode. I mean, I thought, Julian Ciso didn't show up that much. I think the pace wasn't there at the beginning of the game, and sometimes you get that from the heart of this team, which is Andres Cubas, and he wasn't there. And I felt like that was an important missing piece in this game, because we never got the hang of the midfield. It did not look pretty with Diego Gomez and Bobadilla trying to get the balls back. I mean, they didn't recover as much as Andres Cubas does. So I kind of felt like Diego Gomez wasn't in the right spot in this game. Like we weren't taking advantage of one of the best players we have as of right now. And Julio Enciso wasn't producing close to the box. So thankfully, Alex Arce pulled through one of our center forwards scored, I think that's totally positive because Tony Sanabria wasn't 100%. Alfaro said it after the game. He wanted to take him slow after the injury. So it was good for Alex to, finally get a score on. And I think this is just going to build confidence for him going forward. We saw again minutes for players that have been trying to fight for their spot, like Ramon Sosa, like Brian Ojeda already breaking through in the second half. I thought, the minutes that he had in this game really justified what he did in the second game. So he's kind of winning a spot. I think he's, gaining confidence, but also gaining credit with the coach, like Orlando Hill, guys. I mean, I mentioned him before the game, before these two matches, and I said, watch out for this guy. He might be quietly getting into the spot. Now it's 3 games in a row. And I'm starting to have doubts about what could happen in that goalkeeper spot. But overall, I thought it was a good game, mostly because what I saw of the U.S. against Uruguay in that second match, they really stomped on their team. I even thought that the 2-1 score was kind of well, it was kind of low. I thought the U.S. could have scored a couple more, and that's the truth. I thought that the U.S. were the better team and they really deserved to win it. So props to them. I think I didn't expect to have such an organized team already from Mauricio Pochettino, and he really got the best out of this match. So good to them. For us, it wasn't the best game, but we showed our best stuff against Mexico, and I'm happy about that.
Yeah, and obviously the US had some questions even going in, like what is their best team, what really is their identity, and they showcased it in this game, and of course afterwards when they beat Uruguay 5-1 on the same day Mexico played Paraguay. But yeah, I think going back as well that game, I think we also saw a little bit, Ralph going into that feisty sort of mode. We saw a fight at the end. It was a battle between, right towards the end, at the fortune of being in a good vantage point of what I saw. But Paraguay were attacking right there in the last few minutes of the game. They looked like they were trying to go for an equalizer, and right at the end, Gustavo Gomez thought that the throw in was going to be for him, whereas it was supposed to be for the U.S., and that's where that scuffle began. And surprisingly, only Omar Lerete was the one that was sent off, which I think, if you're a Sunderland fan or anyone that's in Sunderland, is great news because there was the fear that him coming back from injury that you would risk it again. Even Alfaro said in the press conference that the most he could have done was 90 minutes throughout both games, so 60 minutes in one game and 30 minutes in another, or vice versa. And he ends up not playing it at all, Ralph. But yeah, this is weird. I was looking at some of the stats that we've had. All the red cards under the Alfaro era have all come from the bench. They've not been in physical sort of actual play. It was this one, and then if you remember in the game against Bolivia over there in El Alto, it was Diego Gomez that got sent off, but he was on the bench, so it's a weird stat. I don't know if it has any sort of effect on all this, but it's kind of weird that this is all coming from the bench and not in actual play.
Yeah, well, I mean, it speaks a bit to the mentality, I suppose, more than anything, because it's not a particularly aggressive foul, and it's definitely not like 2 yellow cards. But the game, just for those that maybe didn't see it, it had been boiling over partly because the referee wasn't very good. The referee didn't
Acrobat
really have a
Studio
hold
is
of
on
the
hill.
game. And then what we saw was, I think, Bobadilla and Alonso got yellow cards quite shortly before that incident. Like as the game's ending, there's a few more fouls flying in, and just people are getting a bit frustrated, and so it all boils over. And it is maybe a bit disappointing that it comes from Gustavo Gomez, the captain, that starts it. But then at the same time, maybe we should be happy that he does have that will to win at the end of the game, and or will to try and equalize, and does want to get things moving. So there's both ways of looking at it. But definitely, I mean, Alderete just totally overreacted. There's no need to come like flying off the bench for that. There was nothing was going to happen basically. So for him to do that, and then obviously when one player comes off the bench, then everybody comes in, and you get this whole kind of melee. So I don't know. It's like you say, it's strange that it keeps coming from the bench. So it's almost a bit like, is maybe also Alfaro there? Does he get so like tightly wound up that his players end up following him? I don't know. But it's definitely something to keep an eye out because these suspensions are really going to hurt Paraguay. We saw it, by the way, in youth team. We saw it with Enzo Gonzalez. We talked about Diego Gomez. I'm pretty sure I remember he did the same thing in Odesur when he got a red card in I think it was in the Odesur or maybe the Sudamericano, I can't remember. Similar to what happened in Bolivia. So I mean, it has happened a few times. It's not like this wasn't a one-off situation. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
This is not South America anymore. This is not CONMEBOL, guys. And when you got FIFA refs there, and I think, after what I saw from the last World Cup and even some brawls in field that translated into the crowd, I mean, I think FIFA is going to be on top of this situation. And I think they're going to go hard on the sanctions in this World Cup. So I would really be careful with these things, with these kind of reactions. You really got to be uh, in control of your temper. Even though you're playing at 100%, you're giving it your all. I understand everything that's on stake, but I mean, we got to control the situation so it doesn't happen. I don't want to see our important players get sent off. We're just coming off an important tournament in the under 20 where we lost one of our most important players, Enzo Gonzalez, due to a very dumb collision there, a very hard foul, and I don't want to see those kind of mistakes in field and outside either. I don't. I want our players to be focused on just playing, but it is part of the team also. I mean, this team has the garra, this team has the temper. This team, when it's down, it's probably when they show their best stuff, their best version. Sometimes we need to get scored on to start attacking, but if there's a takeaway also from these two games, not just the US game, is probably that we're not going to have the ball that much, guys. I mean, this team is not going to go up in possession. I mean, we're definitely going to be the team that's going to have the ball probably 30-40% at the most, I would even say, in most matches in the World Cup that's coming up. And we're just going to have our football 3-4 touches, 3-4 good passes, and our combinations are just going to be going forward with a lot of speed. That's what I see out of this team with Almiron, with Julian Ciso, and with just one center forward. I don't see an attacking team, even though we did play with fullbacks on the side. They did not attack that much. We didn't see Juan Cáceres go all out. We didn't see Blas Rivero go all out in every opportunity they could. So I think it's part of the strategy and part of the team also coming together. This is the identity that we're seeing from this team, and I like it. I mean, I think Paraguayan football is like that. I mean, we're not accustomed to having the ball that much, and I think everything is kind of fitting its place as of right now, especially when we go against these kind of teams that do like to have the ball a lot more, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is going to be part of the game. I think heading into obviously, March, if we get friendlies of that caliber, of higher caliber, teams that are be obviously more physically demanding, and obviously for the World Cup, like that's just going to be at a higher notch, Ralph. I think that's going to be something that you're gonna have to deal with. And the United States kind of showed that, as much as that might not be the reality that people want to accept. Just to close it off on this game before we go to the Mexico game, that is, I think, the reality that the Paraguay teams need to, or at least the players need to understand, that they need to up the ante when it comes to physicality, but do it in a way that doesn't get them too, vicious, because obviously FIFA and referees and all that will go on to that.
Yeah, the controlled aggression, and but I mean, I think we saw it mostly in the qualifiers that when it does come to the to those big games, Paraguay are up for it. Maybe it's just a bit of it can be these strange environments in the friendlies. Um, but I was also surprised. We talked about it before the game or last week's show, I think, where the US haven't played competitive games for so long. So I wasn't sure if they'd really be able to match that kind of attitude, I suppose. But really, they were much more than I expected. And if you remember, it even produces a goal. Really, I mean, that's the winning goal is because Cáceres is kind of hounded out and unable to get out of the Paraguay third, and then he gets pressured. So it was something that was constantly throughout. And like you say, yeah, Paraguay need to find that way to when they need to switch and up the level, they can do it without it going over the top. But there's time to work on that, and I'm not too concerned because in the sense that we have seen in the actual competitive games where they've gone up against, a Uruguay or a Colombia, they've been able to match them. We've been slow starters. That's been one thing, right? Even again, we conceded first again here. We've been very slow starters, but we've often found that kind of switch when we need to and been able to do it in the big games. So I'm hopeful that can continue in the World Cup.
Totally. And now switching gears to what we saw against Mexico, a really different squad. Like I said, we didn't have a lot of the main players in the defense playing as much. So it was a totally different squad. And one thing that I do want to mention before we go into that is, again, Gil playing again. I guess to be straightforward, I think barring anything from Gatito making any form, that's your number one in the goal in for the World Cup, isn't it, Fede?
He's definitely winning. I think the race is right now. I mean, 3 games in a row. It's because of a reason. I mean, is it because Gatito is down on himself as of right now? I know he's been through a lot this year on his on a personal ground. I mean, it definitely affects the player somehow on a day-to-day basis. Also, I've heard from people that he's been kind of low on that sense. From the emotional side, and I think Alfaro's trying to get to him in that sense. Go find a team, get out of Paraguay, be yourself again, find your confidence, find your best self again, because that's not what we've seen from Gatito lately, and we saw it in the Asian tour, right? So it was Orlando Hill's opportunity to shine, to have the chance to play a couple of games, to feel with a different defense, right? Because it's not the same to play with Gustavo Gomez and Alderete both games than to change the center backs all of the time. That does not make the goalkeeper's job any easier. But I thought he did all right. I don't think he stood out, but he did have a couple of plays where he stopped a couple of goals, so that was good for him. And he is in some things and a couple of characteristics very similar, I would even say, to Gatito Fernandez, in the sense that he doesn't leave his box that much. He doesn't like to take 1 or 2 steps in front of him. He likes to stay under the bar there, but he's huge, guys. I mean, he definitely makes his presence feel there, and I think he's the youngest one that we have as of right now. Building, he's doing really well at his club, so I wouldn't be surprised as of right now, after seeing that he started the last 3 games. We start the year 2026 with him maybe again in the next friendly, also having the starting job. And this could just go on until the World Cup if Gatito Fernandez doesn't find his place, if he doesn't find his club, and if he doesn't find the right level and start playing like Gustavo Alfaro probably wants him to do.
Yeah, that's right. I think the fact he let him start both games was a statement. There's no other way to put it. So Alfaro is saying, look, this is going to be my starting goalkeeper unless something changes. So it's really putting that pressure on Gatito to go and find the club and do something. We have a similar situation with a player that's not a goalkeeper that's not in the squad in Carlos Coronel, because he's just left New York Red Bulls. He's decided not to renew with them. So I mean, right now of the 2 goalkeepers that were playing in the previous qualifiers, they're both pretty much either not playing or without a club. So it really is pointing to Hill, I think, to be that starting goalkeeper. I'm with Fede on the fact that it's not that he's done anything incredible in these games to kind of earn the place, but then you don't really need that from a goalkeeper, I suppose. You just need them to be solid and be reliable, like we had with Anthony Silva for so many years, right? He was just there pretty much because there was nobody else. No offense to Anthony Silva, but he was the best of what you got, and he was solid and reliable. So I think that's where we're going at the moment. I mean, with Orlando Hill, unless something happens, and especially unless Gatito finds a club where he plays and really excels, he has to do something, really special, I think, to win it back.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And especially looking at some of these players that played, going into the defense, we had Ana Benitez playing, Gustavo Velasquez, Alexis Duarte making his debut for Paraguay, Agustin Sandez, Brian Ojeda in that midfield with Matias Galarza, Ramon Sosa, Diego Gomez, Almiron, and then Tony Sanabria instead of Alex Arce, the guy that scored on the weekend. He gets the starting role in this one. And not much going on in the first half, but it was in the second half that changed everything. And there's one guy that we have to talk about, I think, that stole the headlines out of anyone. It's Julio Enciso. Julio Enciso with an incredible performance, and he didn't even score in this game. No, he got both assists for the 2 goals, 2 lovely goals, I would say. The first goal, where obviously VAR had to intervene, it was a lovely pass for Sanabria to win his first goal in a year, by the way. So that's a really good confidence booster. Then obviously Mexico get a penalty straight afterwards. Really, I don't want to say reckless, but definitely not the best foul for Ojeda to get. And Jimenez scoring with ease. He was maybe a bit slow to overreact on that one, but obviously Mexico score. But then just a few minutes later, Enciso pings a really nice ball to Damian Bobadilla for his first goal for Paraguay. And Paraguay get all 3 points. Then they win this game. They beat Mexico yet again. And yeah, I mean, again, like, I guess I'll go to Ralph on this one. All the attention was given on Julio Enciso. I think there had been some sort of claim about what Julio can do that obviously we didn't see in the first game, but for him to be sort of unselfish in the way that, there had been some times where he could have probably scored, but he found the right way to get both assists for the Sanabria goal and the Bobadilla goal, and he gets man of the match for me in this one.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said that that first half, nothing really happens. The biggest talking point was the state of the pitch, which was awful. I mean, that was we're not going to
It
see
was
that in the
bad.
World Cup, of course,
No,
because
totally not.
yeah,
Hopefully.
I think FIFA are going to be much stricter actually on preparing the fields ahead of time. So yeah, not much was going on, and you thought, yeah, this is maybe not a wasted opportunity, but it's like maybe we've made too many changes because with this, you would never see this starting 11 unless there was, like catastrophic injuries to so many people. So you're like, are we going to get much out of this? Because you always want to see like what can we learn from the friendly? And then Enciso comes on, and I think we started to see what we really hope for. One thing that Enciso, he's obviously so talented, so he's able to play those kind of passes like the one he does for Sanabria's first goal. But also Sanabria is one of the players that has that movement playing up front that can do that and can get on the end of those goals. So I think that was good to see that partnership. And then I really do like the second goal, like you were talking about, Roberto, because it's actually Enciso's involved in everything. I think he takes a free kick, which gets defended. Then one of the shots is blocked. It falls to him. He has a shot that gets blocked again. And then as it comes back to him, he's the one that realizes, okay, there's something on here, and it's with his left foot, which isn't obviously his stronger foot, that he plays that perfect cross into Boadilla to get the goal. And it was one of those things where you thought this goal only happened because of Enciso and in different ways, but he was so involved in everything. It was like very all action. And that was his whole performance once he came on off the bench. Totally different to how he played against the US, where he didn't get enough touches. I don't even think he attempted a dribble. I remember I was looking at the stats against the US, like he just wasn't really himself. Whereas in this game, totally different player makes the difference. And that's what we want to see from him in these big games.
Definitely wanted to see him come back because I did not like what I saw from him against the U.S. Right, he never got into the game. He didn't touch the ball that much. But when he came into the game against Mexico, he really felt his. You could really feel his presence. And we don't have another Julio Enciso, guys, in this squad. We don't have another Julio Enciso in the Paraguayan league. So we definitely need Julio Enciso to be his best self going to the World Cup. I think Gustavo Faro mentioned it on the press conference. He wanted to see Hugo Cuenca in this game. He wanted to see different players in this match, but a lot of them weren't available. So he kind of ended up putting together the best possible team he could. Just like Ralph said, I mean, there weren't going to be that many changes if he had everybody available, or even if the clubs didn't hold him back either, because he mentioned that in the press conference. Oh, I had to negotiate with this club, certain minutes for this player, certain minutes for this one. He definitely wanted to say it because he was putting a different team out there with a lot of changes. So we definitely felt it in the first half, but I was happy overall with the defense, especially Alexis Duarte coming in. He was one of the new players on the starting 11, and I saw the same Alexis Duarte that I saw in Cerro Porteño, that I see in the highlights, and that's what you want to see in the national team. The same, you be yourself, just out there. And another player to stand out is Damian Bobadilla. He scored the second goal. He gave us the victory, and he's the same player in his club, in the national team. And I love that from our guys. He's a very low profile kind of guy. And just like his dad, right? Aldo Bobadilla, you never heard him that much in press conference. He's always leaving the locker room kind of quiet. But Damian is, very important in this team. And he's definitely going to be one of the key factors for that midfield to work alongside Diego Gomez, alongside obviously Andres Cubas, who again I mentioned him because I think he was the missing piece in these two games. But from Julio Enciso, I want to give him props because he's the difference in this team. We get the same level from Miguel Almiron pretty much in every game, but he gave us that pause that we weren't having with the ball, and he was the brains of those two goals, right? I mean, he had the assist, but he was smart out there, and I love that from Julio because I think the game is kind of slowing down for him again because he's finding his speed again. He's feeling comfortable with the ball, and that's what I wanted to see from Julio Enciso in these two games. And we got that Julio Enciso that can be the star on this team or the star in certain games going into the World Cup. I wanted to see that from Julio, and he showed up in the second half to give us the victory.
He totally did. And I think now looking at these last friendlies, because obviously the World Cup draw is in 14 days. And I think as much as we are waiting for that, I think we're also waiting for that squad to be announced because it is official that it'll be 26 at the most. That's the most that Paraguay can do. We'll have to see if Alfaro is going to use that or he'll use less. But there's some players that impressed. I mean, Ralph, I think one guy that I really enjoyed watching was Blas Riveros. I think that's also something that from a left back position, it's still kind of open because you see Junior Alonso there who obviously is so important, but sometimes he can have his flaws. So you have him that I think definitely impressed. I think Alex Arce also passed with flying colors in this one, in this sort of thing. Ojeda, I think besides the friendly, I thought he did decently well to get in there. You kind of see him getting into the final squad, and yeah, so kind of the stock up, stock down, I would say. I think the stock up totally goes to someone like Blas Riveros, and stock down. Probably Agustin Sanders. I thought he was very uncomfortable in the game against Mexico. So yeah, those are some of the players that I enjoyed and maybe didn't. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a good point about Riveros because that left back has been that issue, right? You can play Junior Alonso there, and that's fine. But if you do want someone a bit more attacking, it's got to be Leon, Sanders, or Riveros. And in those three, you have Sanders hasn't really impressed. Leon isn't really playing. And so it kind of gives you have Riveros is a guy where he's playing a lot, but he's like dropped back a level because he's come back to Paraguay having been in Europe for a long time. But it seems of the three, he's maybe the one at the moment that's going to be able to do the best. But I still think it's a change if you don't play Alonso. Like Alonso probably would have played left back had Alderete started in the US game. But I think he's of those three left backs, attacking left backs, he's the one that's making his best case at the moment. And then just to highlight, I think Boadilla because I know we just talked about him, but Boadilla was not really a starter for Sao Paulo, and then he got in there. He was not really a starter in Alfaro's team because he preferred Galarza when at the beginning, and now he's made a case to be not just a starter, but like you just wouldn't consider dropping him. And his numbers are very impressive. And he's that one player I'm also looking at who could have a good World Cup and maybe still go to Europe. That's from there because you have a lot of these players like Blas Riveros, for example, is not going to go back to Europe at this stage in his career. And then you have the ones that are already there, and Iñigo Gomez and then Cisa and everybody. So Boadilla is maybe the guy that can win the most from the World Cup, if that makes sense, in terms of his career. And so such an important move. So of course everybody's motivated to go and play there, but maybe he has that little bit extra knowing that he's in Brazil now, but he's showing these numbers, showing this quality that there's even more to him that we might be able to see after the World Cup going into next season.
Yeah, I also wanted to mention one of the new names that got a couple of minutes at least, right? From Recoleta, Lucas Romero. He got in there in the game, those last minutes, at least to, have his debut and to feel part of this team also. It's gotta be special for him. I don't know if he's really gonna earn a spot going into the World Cup because of all the midfielders that we really have. You have Diego Gonzalez also, he's earning his minutes also as an attacking player. So I don't know how he's gonna end up giving all the opportunities to all the players that he has, but it's important for Lucas Romero. He's only 23 years old. There's rumors that he might be transferred at the end of the year. He had a really good season also with Recoleta. I think it's a great opportunity for him to make a leap to another league. There's talks that he might go to Argentina. Where Agustin Sanders had a really good tournament, guys. I'm looking at his numbers, regularly played in one of the best teams in Argentina, Rosario Central, where Di Maria also plays. So I mean, I don't know. That left back position, I thought Diego was going to have an opportunity, Diego Leon, because he's one of the young ones, but he ended up going with other players. He didn't give a single minute to Diego Leon. So I think this kind of cuts his opportunity, but there's still so many months to go on before we get to the World Cup. So it is that countdown. You're looking at the list and you're thinking, okay, which players can still fight for an opportunity, which players can still evolve. Yeah, we're talking about Boadilla, and I think he's one of the players that, in this last year, ever since Alfaro took over, he's probably one of the guys that grew the most. And there's other players that went kind of low on their level, and especially in their chances in their clubs. I mean, Ralph mentioned Galarza, and look at him now. He's totally a different player with his confidence. He's barely playing in River. So it really depends on that, right? And probably these last couple of months, just how much you play in your club, how well you do there to really convince the coach that you earned a spot also for the World Cup. I don't think it's just about what you do in these friendlies. I think it also has to do with what you do when you are back with your club. But overall, I mean, 14 shots against Mexico, 5 of those were stopped by the Mexican goalkeeper. Like I told you guys, U.S. was better against us. We were better than Mexico. We deserved that win, and I would even say we deserved it by a couple more goals.
Yeah, no, totally. I think it really looked like it because, the referee was a bit off. There were some offside goals in that one. So yeah, I think it should have been better. But hey, a win's a win. And I think we need that heading into the World Cup draw. And I guess I have to ask you guys before we close it out, how are you guys feeling? How are you guys feeling about that World Cup draw? Because I'm looking at some of the teams. I don't know if you've been able to see the games in Europe, the games in CONCACAF and in Africa. I'll go to Fede on this one. They are a pot three team. Is there a team where you're like looking at it or you're just like, nah, let's go for whoever?
I'm thinking bring on whoever you want. To be honest with you guys, I'm feeling good about our team. I'm feeling good about the qualifiers that we did. I mean, we beat Brazil and Argentina at home, guys, and this team
And
has
Uruguay.
shown enough confidence. Uruguay also. So I mean, this team is on a high right now, and they showed what they can do in the second half against Mexico. This shows them that we're still the same team, even though we qualified. We can still be on that mode. We can come back and be our best team. So definitely, this team can do some things, right? I bring on
Yeah,
whoever.
I'm the same. I'm not too worried about the rivals. I'm more looking at the venues because I'm hoping they play in Texas. And not in Canada, for example, where I don't think I'll be able to get to. It'll be too far. So I'm more looking at where the venues will be than the rivals. But it's getting there. We've been waiting so long for this, right? 15 years for a World Cup draw. So here we are. We're just 2 weeks away.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree
Who
with
do
you,
you
Ralph.
want to avoid, Roberto? I'm looking at you. You want to avoid a couple of teams.
Uh, no, no. I mean, if we're gonna perform well, you gotta perform against whoever comes out. Like, I think the World Cup is such a different story that you get these teams that obviously are of high caliber, and there's some amazing stories of obviously Paraguay broke their drought, but you look at droughts that were broken like Cape Verde going for the first time, or Curacao, Haiti, Norway, first time ever in a long time. Not ever, but the first time in almost 30 years. Norway, Scotland, them coming back. I mean, you gotta go with whoever, I guess. It's it's in God's hands, I guess. And yeah, I agree, Ralph. Whatever the closest, as much as you want the closest one for Texas, I want the closest one for the Northeast. So we're all kind of going for our little sort of hopes, I guess. But yeah, it's gonna be fun. I can't wait. Obviously we got a couple weeks before that. Obviously, you have the Clausura to hopefully maybe we see a champion this weekend. Maybe we get it the following week. We'll see if it's gonna be Cerro Guarani. Obviously, we have the Copa Sudamericana final tomorrow. Obviously, the Libertadores soon as well. And then yeah, then we're heading into December 5th for that big draw, the last final big moment of the year. And then we'll see what happens as we always discuss it here on Guarani Vision. For myself, Roberto Rojas, Fede Perez, and Ralph Hanna, thank you so much for listening in. See you soon.